Welcome to Sabbath School Daily. We have been studying from this lesson right here, Psalms. This week we're studying from lesson number 9, which has the title, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And today is Tuesday's lesson, which has the title, Forever Faithful to his Covenant. I really like what the author included in today's lesson. I'm going to read to you several of the paragraphs, if not all of them. But I want you to remember that the concept of covenant in the Bible is extremely deep. This is a Hebrew word called berit, and it's God extending a contract, a deal to the human family in order to save them. It's God saying, look, I will do this, this, and this if you do this, this, and this. Now, unfortunately, from the human side, we were never really able to fulfill the terms of this covenant. Human beings never were. If you look at all of the covenants that were extended to Adam, to Noah, to Abraham, to Isaac and Jacob, to the children of Israel, to the kings, to the prophets, you'll see that consistently in one moment and in one way or another, the covenant from the human side was always broken. God would constantly be extending his arm, but the human counterpart was never able to truly grab hold of it and hold on. And so when Jesus comes around and he lives as a human being and he lives our life and he conquers and is victorious, that is when humanity is able to take hold of the arm of God and lock onto it. That is why Jesus is a bridge between us and God, because as a man, he was able, from the human side, to take hold of the arm of God. Do you see how incredible God is? Not only does he reach down and offer us a way out, but he then comes as a human and reaches up to take God's arm in order to save and restore us, because there was no way that we were going to do it on our own. So God fulfills the complete terms of the covenant. Now, unfortunately, what we do see is that, again, constantly humans, they are unable to keep any of these terms. Sometimes they're doing okay and then they fall and stumble. And God, he provides these conditional covenants in the terms of, look, if you do this, then this, this, and this is going to happen. If you don't do this, then this and this and this is going to happen. It's cause and effect. God is the God of cause and effect. He is the God of the laws of nature. The laws of what goes up must come down, of what hits here must break there. So that is the God that we serve. He created all of these laws of nature because he is a God of cause and effect. But that is not the ultimate law, because we do see that God still offers us a way out and helps us achieve the way out. Now look at what the lesson says about that. The Davidic covenant contains God's promise of everlasting support of David's line and prosperity of God's people. The permanence of the covenant was established on God's solemn oath and the king's faithfulness to God. However, even the devoted kings, such as King David, were not always faithful to the Lord. Psalm 89 laments over the harsh reality that seems to indicate that the glorious promises of the Davidic covenant have been lost. Is Israel hopelessly deserted by God? The answer, of course, is no. So this is in the context of the Davidic covenant. And you'll see that throughout the whole Bible, there are several versions of the covenant. I disagree with the idea that God gave us multiple covenants. There are so many covenants. There are different versions and different moments of the covenant, but ultimately the covenant is God's covenant of love. What these covenants, what these berit achieve or try to achieve is the redemption of human beings. It's again, God extending his hand to save. So the covenant is one. You have it being renewed over and over again. In the New Testament, you have the new covenant, which is the old covenant made new, right? It's renewed. In the Greek language, there are two words that represent the concept of new. There is new of the same kind and new of a brand new, different kind. What we see in the covenants is new of the same kind. It's God renewing the covenant that he had made in the past, because he didn't fail on those covenants. It was the human counterpart that failed. And so you have the Adamic covenant, the Noamic covenant, the Abrahamic covenant, the Israelite covenant, the Davidic covenant. You have so many of these different covenants, which is God extending this desire to save, this contract of salvation to human beings. And then these counterparties are always failing, but God never fails. And so I disagree when people say, oh, because you have the new covenant, the old covenant, this covenant, that covenant. Yes, you do find those words being used, but not in the way that we would use those words, not in the way that our mind today understands those words. It's new in the terms of circumstance. It's always different circumstances when God offers these covenants. To Adam, there's a whole complete context. To Noah, there's a whole context. To Abraham, to Israel, to David. And then after Jesus dies on the cross and he truly fulfills the covenant, you have the new covenant in his blood. And this is an everlasting covenant. It's an unending covenant. Why? Because Jesus' sacrifice is an everlasting sacrifice. It lasts and it's valid forever. So keep that in mind as you navigate this topic, this subject of covenant. It's not really brand new covenants. It's the same covenant of love, of salvation, of redemption being offered to different people in different circumstances in different moments. The circumstances change, but God never changes. So just keep that in mind. The lesson then continues. God's wrath is, yes, an expression of divine judgment, yet it does not last forever because God's everlasting love forgives people's sins when people repent. However, while it lasts, God's discontent with his erring people is serious. The people feel the bitter consequences of their disobedience and realize the gravity of their sins. Yet they ask, how long? Appealing to the passing character of God's wrath. Renewed hope springs from the new assurance in God's faithfulness to remember his grace. If you want a little bit more about the covenant, you can see for example, the Israelite covenant offered on Mount Sinai. You'll see that in Deuteronomy chapter, I believe, 28 through 31 or 32. And that is the description of this covenant. And so there are the terms of the covenant coming from God, the terms of the covenant coming from the human counterpart, from the Israelites, where God says, if you are able to keep this covenant, if you do this and this and this, then I will do this and this and this. And what I love about this is that God knows the future. He knows what was going to happen, and yet he offers this to people. He provides free will, still knowing what was going to happen. Perhaps for those of you who have children, I'm sure that you have given them freedom to do something, knowing that they are going to not do that something. They're not going to fulfill their part of it, but you're giving that to them for them to be able to grow in accountability, in maturity, in knowledge, and even by stumbling, they grow. So here I see the Lord offering freedom to people that he knows are going to abuse that freedom, but how else would the human family grow? How else would we understand him better and understand ourselves better? I really think that one of the greatest obstacles to understanding God is the misunderstanding that we have about our own nature, who we are, what we are, how deep sin runs, and how serious it is. The lesson then continues. In short, although the human component of the covenant failed, the people could rest in the promise of God's unchanging purposes through the Messiah, who embodies all righteousness and salvation of Israel and of the whole world. That is, in the end, God will prevail, and his eternal kingdom will be established forever, but only because of Jesus and not because of God's people. Jesus Christ is the Son of David and the Messiah. He is called the firstborn over all creation, alluding to Psalm 89, verse 27, which calls David, who was a type of Christ, God's firstborn. Also, I will make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. One thing to understand here is, I've mentioned this before, I've talked about this actually quite thoroughly, that there's the contrast between our way of thinking and the Hebrew way, the Semitic way of thinking, the Hebrew mind, the biblical mind. While we tend to think in the terms of quantity, the biblical mind thinks in the terms of quality. So when the Bible calls Jesus the firstborn of creation, or even David the firstborn, right here as we just saw in this text, the firstborn of God, we know that Jesus was not the firstborn of Joseph. We know that Jesus was not the firstborn of creation in the terms of quantity of time. Jesus was born 2,000 years ago. Adam was born before Jesus. There are people that will say that this means that Jesus is the first created being, right? That's a heresy called Arianism. It started with this man called Ario, and it has nothing to do with modern day Arianism in the terms of racial differences and whatnot. That's a whole other thing. But this heresy believed that Jesus was the first created being because of texts such as this one that we find in Colossians that says that Jesus is the firstborn of creation. But that is completely wrong. That is ignoring the Hebrew mentality, where it's not about Jesus being the firstborn in the terms of quantity of time, but in the terms of quality of existence. Jesus, of everyone that has been born here on planet Earth, because Jesus was born, of all who have been born, Jesus is the most important. He is the main one. That is the Greek word prototokos. That's the word that's being used there. That's where the word prototype comes from. It's the first one, right? So in these terms, it's not about the first in the terms of quantity of time, but in the terms of quality. Jesus is the most important. Jacob, for example, is called the firstborn, but we know that Esau came out first. So how can that be? Again, it's firstborn in the terms of quality, in the terms of salvational covenantal promises. Jacob was included in that covenant while Esau was not included in that covenant. David, same thing. He's called the firstborn of God, but he wasn't the firstborn. We know that he had older sons. He was the youngest one, really. So you see that there's a difference here between quality and quantity. And that has everything to do with the way that we think in our Western modern world and how the biblical mind would consider these aspects. Finally, the lesson says, clearly the title firstborn does not express David's biological status because David was the 8th child of his parents. It's the same with Jesus. This title signifies his special honor and authority. God made Jesus the supreme king over the whole world when he raised Jesus from the dead. So that just recapped what I had previously said. I encourage you to study this lesson. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of Bible texts and Bible verses that are included. I didn't read them today, so that's up to you. Read the Bible verses that are included in the lesson. If you don't have a physical copy, you can find it online. There are several websites that include the Seventh-day Adventist quarterly lesson where you can learn, you can read the Bible, you can look at what the lesson is saying, the author is saying. That will help you throughout your study. Please comment down below. I love hearing from you. And also remember to like, to share, and to subscribe to our videos. We release one every day. And I hope to see you again here tomorrow for another Sabbath School Daily.